What happens when a perfectly functioning aircraft refuses to land? On a scorching summer afternoon in 2016, 300 souls aboard Emirates Flight 521 found themselves trapped in a nightmare scenario that would challenge everything we thought we knew about modern aviation safety. This wasn't a mechanical failure or pilot error in the traditional sense, it was something far more insidious. The Boeing 777, one of aviation's most reliable workhorses, was about to write a new chapter in airline safety. As passengers settled into their seats expecting a routine arrival at Dubai International Airport, invisible forces were conspiring to create the airline's first ever fatal accident. What unfolded in those terrifying final moments would expose a dangerous gap in how pilots understand the very technology designed to keep them safe. A routine journey turns critical. Flight 521 began like thousands of flights before it, uneventful and ordinary. Departing from Thiruvananthapuram on India's southern coast, the aircraft carried passengers from 20 different nations, many simply connecting through Dubai's sprawling hub to destinations beyond. The cockpit crew consisted of a highly experienced Emirati captain with over 7,000 flight hours and his Australian first officer, both well-rested and impeccably trained. Neither pilot could have anticipated the deadly trap awaiting them. As they cruised at 36,000 feet over the Arabian Sea, Dubai's meteorological center issued an ominous warning: moderate wind shear affecting all runways. The temperature on the ground had soared to a staggering 48 degrees Celsius, hot enough to create invisible thermal currents rising from the sun-baked concrete, turning the approach into an aerodynamic minefield that would test their skills in ways their training never prepared them for. The invisible enemy, wind shear. Wind shear represents one of aviation's most treacherous hazards, a sudden, unpredictable change in wind speed or direction that can rob an aircraft of lift in seconds. Dubai's coastal location made it particularly vulnerable to this phenomenon, especially during summer months when sea breezes clash with superheated air rising from the desert. These invisible turbulent zones have brought down countless aircraft throughout aviation history. The briefing seemed straightforward enough. The pilots discussed their previous encounters with wind shear, exchanging war stories with the casual confidence of experienced aviators. They reviewed the escape maneuver, press the takeoff button, verify thrust, retract speed brakes, and crucially don't raise the landing gear until clear of danger. But there was something neither pilot knew, a critical detail buried deep in their aircraft's automation logic that would soon become devastatingly relevant in ways no simulator session had ever taught them. The approach into chaos. As Flight 521 descended toward runway 12 left, the situation on the ground was rapidly deteriorating. Unknown to the approaching crew, 2 aircraft ahead of them had already abandoned their landing attempts due to severe wind conditions. Air traffic controllers, following standard procedure, hadn't explicitly communicated these go-arounds to Flight 521 since the aircraft were on different radio frequencies. This information gap meant the pilots were flying blind into a meteorological ambush. The runway temperature had climbed to a scorching 68 degrees Celsius. At these extremes, asphalt becomes a heat radiator, sending powerful thermals skyward that can toss aircraft around like leaves in a storm. The captain disengaged the autopilot at 1,000 feet, taking manual control for the final approach. His hands steady on the controls, he aimed for the white touchdown zone markers. Everything appeared normal until it wasn't. The wind had other plans entirely. Floating above disaster just 40 feet above the runway, the captain initiated the landing flare, gently raising the nose to cushion their descent. But something strange began happening. As the aircraft crossed the threshold, an increasingly powerful headwind caught the wings, generating additional lift that refused to let the massive Boeing settle onto the concrete. The aircraft began floating, suspended mere feet above the runway in an aerodynamic limbo. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The plane's airspeed climbed from the target of 147 knots to 165, a dangerous 80-knot excess caused by the strengthening headwind. The wind shear warning system, designed to alert pilots to exactly this situation, remained silent. Why? Because below 50 feet, Boeing had programmed these warnings to disable assuming pilots were committed to landing. The aircraft drifted past the 1,000-foot markers, eating up precious runway with each passing second while the pilots struggled to understand why their aircraft simply wouldn't touch down. The fatal touch and go then came, the moment that sealed their fate. A sudden gust rolled the aircraft left, and the captain's instinctive correction caused the right main wheels to kiss the runway so briefly, so softly that neither pilot even noticed. But the aircraft's computers noticed. Those wheels touching down triggered a cascade of automated responses designed with the best intentions but about to produce catastrophic consequences. When the landing gear touched, the speed brakes deployed momentarily before retracting when the wheels lifted again. More critically, that fleeting ground contact disabled the toggle switch, the very button the captain would soon press to command maximum thrust for a go-around. Boeing engineers had cleverly programmed this safety feature to prevent pilots from accidentally attempting a go-around while already on the ground. Neither pilot had ever trained for this scenario in the simulator. The trap was set, and they were walking straight into it. The nightmare begins as the long landing warning blared through the cockpit. The captain made the only logical decision: execute a go-around and try again. He pressed the toga button confidently, expecting the engines to roar to life and power them back into the sky. But nothing happened. The throttles remained fixed at idle, exactly where they'd been for the landing. The aircraft's computer, still believing they were on the ground from that momentary wheel contact, refused to respond. The captain pulled back on the controls and the aircraft began climbing, but on momentum alone, not engine power. Neither pilot noticed their engine instruments clearly showing idle thrust. They didn't see that the auto throttle remained in landing mode instead of switching to toga. In the heat of the moment, the captain didn't even realize the throttle levers in his right hand hadn't moved forward. They were attempting the impossible, making a 150-ton aircraft climb while the engines provided barely enough power to taxi. Seconds from catastrophe at 85 feet and slowing dangerously, the stick shaker activated the aircraft's final desperate warning that an aerodynamic stall was imminent. Only then did reality crash into the cockpit. "Winds here, toga," the captain shouted, finally understanding, or so he thought. Ironically, wind shear wasn't their enemy. Their engines being at idle was. Still, the recognition snapped them into action. The captain's hand shot to the throttles, slamming them to maximum power. But jet engines do unrespond instantly. They need at least 6 seconds to spool up from idle to full thrust, a safety feature to prevent compressor stalls. 6 seconds they didn't have. From just 80 feet and sinking fast, the "don't sink" warning screamed through the cockpit. 3 seconds after applying full power, the aircraft slammed back onto the runway with devastating force. The right engine sheared completely off, the landing gear collapsed, and the massive bowing skidded on its belly as fire erupted from ruptured fuel tanks. Aftermath and lessons: the evacuation was chaotic and prolonged. Of the 10 emergency exits, only 3 were usably, others blocked by smoke or escape slides, blown against the fuselage by the same winds that had caused the crash. It took 7 minutes to evacuate all passengers, far exceeding the regulatory 90-second requirement. As the captain and senior crew member made a final sweep through the smoke-filled cabin, searching for stragglers, the center fuel tank exploded, sending debris flying and tragically killing a firefighter responding to the scene. Miraculously, all 300 people aboard survived, though 4 crew members sustained serious injuries. For Emirates, this was their first hull loss and first fatality, a devastating blow to an airline that had operated for 31 years without losing a single aircraft. The investigation revealed uncomfortable truths about the gap between how automation works and how pilots understand it. Training had focused on go-arounds from 50 feet or higher, never from after touchdown. The simulator had never presented this scenario. Moving forward, the paradox of technology: the crash prompted sweeping changes across the industry. Emirates immediately implemented training for go-arounds after touchdown, not just from altitude. Simulator programs now deliberately introduce small mistakes for monitoring pilots to catch, reinforcing the crucial practice of cross-checking. Dubai Air Traffic Control began sharing detailed wind shear information between aircraft, including specific speed gains or losses experienced during landing attempts. These changes transformed a tragedy into a catalyst for safer skies. But Flight 521 exposed a fundamental paradox facing modern aviation. Increased automation makes flying safer by reducing pilot workload and catching human errors, yet it also creates new, more subtle failure modes that humans struggle to predict or understand. Aircraft crash less frequently than ever before, but when they do crash, it's often because of complex interactions between humans and the sophisticated systems meant to protect them. As Boeing and Airbus develop ever more advanced automation, this tension will only intensify. We hope this documentary has given you valuable insights into the complexities of modern aviation safety. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe to the World Documentaries, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced turbulence or a go-around during a flight? How did it make you feel? We'd love to hear your aviation stories and perspectives. Join our community of curious minds exploring the fascinating intersection of technology, human psychology, and real-world consequences. Check out our channel for more in-depth investigations into the incidents that shaped our modern world, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our next compelling story.